Welcome to a conversation with Dong Tao, Chief Regional Economist for the Asia Pacific here at Credit Suisse. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Tao.
Thank you.
You set a 2010 GDP growth target of 9.6 for China. Could you tell us what the drivers are behind that growth?
Well, I think China is the first country among the major economies getting out of the recession, largely driven by the infrastructure investment and very loose monetary policy. I think the best part of that is behind us, but the monetary policy liquidity will remain very ample, and infrastructure investments will remain solid. What's going to make a little bit difference this year from last year is we expect the exports are picking up, probably substantially. Despite all these talks about U.S. slowing down, Europe slowing down, on the ground, actually, the Chinese exporters received quite lots of orders flooding in. Some of them are telling me that the orders will be as good as until early part of next year. So I expect the export growth will be much stronger compared to the previous year. And I think the consumption, especially low end in the third tier, fourth tier cities, the retail sales would further accelerate.
And what do you see as the main risks for the Chinese economy right now?
Well, in the short term, I think inflation is a risk. I think the government officials and also the market consensus probably have underestimated the inflationary momentum, especially in the second half. Most people thinking that perhaps inflation is going to peak around the middle of the year. But I think the food prices will go up further. And given how the salary is being pushed up lately, in the second half we probably will see also the service sector and the rents moving up. The medium-term risk is local government's debt burden. The Chinese bank lending shot up from 5 trillion a year to 10 trillion a year, and most of these being done in one quarter last year. So I don't know how the banks did their due diligence. I suspect some of these lending will be bad. Some of these infrastructure investment will never really get decent return. So the debt crisis at the local government level is my concern, and I think this is probably the biggest challenge China faced over the past decade.
What are your expectations for the Chinese currency?
Lots of talks about the Chinese currency, and certainly we see the pressure from the U.S., from Europe, and from some other places. My view is the more we hear the noise from the outside, the less likely that Beijing is going to appreciate the currency. Unlike depreciation, appreciation, especially with close to capital accounts, will be largely depend on Beijing instead of from the external pressure or the market force. I do think that the Chinese currency is undervalued. I do see China will see the currency to appreciate, maybe start from the middle of the year, gradually. A few years down the road, I would expect the Chinese currency to appreciate much faster. When China appreciates the currency in a meaningful way, it must be driven from the incentives from within, instead of from Obama or from ECB. Okay. When the Chinese consumers have a much bigger influence in the decision-making process, when consumption takes a much greater share of the domestic economy, that's time I think the Chinese currency is going to appreciate faster. Today when you talk to the Chinese officials, whenever you talk about exchange rate, it's always about the exports, exports, exports. 5 years down the road, as the consumption part of the economy grow, I would say by then there will be two dimensions. One is called exporters' competitiveness. The other one is consumers' purchasing power. And that's time as the Chinese economy shift away towards more domestic consumption driven, then I think the Chinese currency is going to see more meaningful appreciation.
Thank you very much for your time and your insight, Mr. Tao.
Thank you.